Welcome to episode 131 of the How Did It Happen podcast, hosted by Mike Malatesta. In this episode, Mike welcomes Naveen Jain, the CEO and founder of Viome, a company focused on disrupting healthcare with the goal of making illness elective.
Hi, Naveen. Welcome to the show.
Well, Mike, it's an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
Well, it's an honor for me because, as I told you when I asked you to be on the show, when I first saw you and first heard about you, which really wasn't that long ago, I'm kind of embarrassed about that, but it's true. I was on an Abundance 360 call, and we were talking about Viome. And there were a couple people on the call, and Naveen is the founder and CEO of Viome. But when he started going, I was just like, the energy that's coming from this individual is something that I need to get more of and I need to share. So he was kind enough to accept my invitation, and here we are. So get ready. Naveen, I start every show with the same question, and that is, how did it happen for you?
Well, I think, Mike, again, in life, it is not that things happen to you. How do you make things happen, right? So I think we need to rephrase that question. How did it happen? It's not ever incidental that you were walking and you saw the wallet and you say, maybe I'll pick it up, right? It rarely happens that way. So in fact, the way, I go about any industry, anytime I start a company, I go through this idea of asking yourself three sets of questions. Why this? Why now? Why me? And I think I'm going to describe to you, and I'm going to frame the Viome in terms of when I started Viome, how did I answer the question? So the first thing is, why this? And the why this really is, you ask yourself and say, God forbid, I am actually successful in doing what I'm about to be doing. Is it really going to help the lives of 1 million people, 100 million people, 1 billion people? If the answer to that is no, then why would you want to waste a decade of your life doing something that's just not going to move the needle? So, and also, it is also the bigger the market, the bigger the problem, bigger the opportunity you have. So if you can find a problem that can help 1 billion people live a better life, there is no doubt in my mind you can create $100 billion company. But you can never set out to create $100 billion company unless you focus on helping those billion people live a better life, right? And the second part of the question, so in this case, we say, my job at Viome that I'm going to be doing is going to be fundamentally, can we prevent and reverse chronic diseases using food as a medicine? And I said, God forbid if you're successful in doing that, would it help 1 billion people? And the answer was, God, it's going to help 7 billion people on this planet live a better life, because every one of us is suffering from a chronic disease now or will suffer in our lifetime. And even if we can live a completely disease-free life, so-called disease, one chronic disease that is going to kill us all is called aging. And that itself is a disease that we need to take care of. So point is, this is a chronic disease that impacts every one of us. So I thought, God, that first check mark, we got that right. The second part is, why now? Now, despite what you may hear, Mike, from anyone that tell you it's all about the idea and it's about the vision, it's about the team, it's about the execution, let me tell you one thing. The number one predictor of the success is timing, right? So I don't care what anyone tells you. You can have the most brilliant idea and the wrong timing. It just doesn't work, right? It's not that Facebook was the first company that figured out how to do social network. And there was MySpace before Friendster, and there were a lot of people came and went. When the timing was right, that's when the things happen, right? So in this case, to me, the timing is not about just can you get lucky. The question you have to ask yourself is, what has changed in the last 2 years or 3 years that allows us to solve this problem today than it then could have been done a decade ago? If nothing had changed and you're going to be using exactly the same set of technology that were available a decade ago, then you have to assume you're not the brightest guy in the world. Someone else would have solved it. The reason it's time is now is, what are the things that are suddenly happening that creates this opportunity to solve this problem than it was available before? Let me give you a couple of examples. COVID happened. Oh my God, suddenly the whole world changed, and the opportunity that COVID created didn't exist a year ago. right? Who would have ever thought that a hospital system, what a healthcare system is going to suddenly adopt telehealth as if something totally new just happened, right?
Right. Sure.
Point is, despite all the bad things that happened because of COVID, I can tell you that it has a silver lining. It has moved the healthcare at least a decade ahead of where it would have been. Not only just the telehealth. The second thing that has really changed here, and Mike, I'm just going slightly off topic, I'm going to come back to it. The second thing that COVID has really changed is it has given each one of us a responsibility for our own health. Before COVID, it used to be, hey, I do things I do. When I get sick, I go to the hospital and doctor takes care of me. That's the model we had. Now, each one of us look at each other and saying, I don't want to be sick. I don't want to go to the hospital. The last thing I want to is to get COVID and be in the hospital. I don't want that anymore. And now we are saying, what can I do? Can I take immune supplements? Can I go buy some nutraceuticals that I can? What can I do? Can I wear a mask? Can I not go do this? That means people are saying, I am responsible for my own health. I cannot just rely on doctor taking care of me. And that is a fundamental shift that I think is going to be permanent shift, where people are starting to become more and more self-centric, in a sense that they believe they can be the CEO of their own health. They can be empowered to take control of their health. Now, coming back to my original thought of why now, our thought was the only way you can solve the problem of a chronic disease is to understand the human biology. You have to be able to digitize the human body. And that means your body is analog. Everything you look at our body is completely analog. Can we digitize the human body? And even if you were to do so, can it be done at a price point that people can afford? That means cost of sequencing cannot be $1,000, cannot be $100. It has to come down to $10 for it to happen. Guess what? 4 years ago, when I started the company, I saw that cost of sequencing was coming down exponentially. And we knew in the next couple of years, it's going to be down to a point where we can actually make it a direct to consumer business. The second part is, now that you digitize the human body, what do you do with it? You have to have a massive computing power to be able to actually process this information. And that would have required a supercomputer 10 years ago. Today, you can fire up 1,000 cores on AWS, and every one of us have access to supercomputer, right? That couldn't have been possible a decade ago. The third part is, once you computed all this stuff and process all the data, what do you do with that? The AI has to be powerful enough to be able to take this petabytes of data, thousands of data points, and make some sense out of it. And we saw that AI is starting to get more and more powerful. Is the neural nets are coming along, you'll be able to execute them, and you'll be able to actually make sense of it. And that's why we thought timing was now, right?
Okay.
Now, so that means cost of sequencing coming down, cost of processing is coming down, AI is becoming more powerful, and those are the three things we need to make this happen, and thought timing was now. The third thing is, why me? And why me is about, this is, by the way, the most important question. Everyone who is listening to it, pay attention here. Why me is, what question that I am asking that is different from what anyone else is asking. As an entrepreneur, it is not my job to have the right answers. My job is to ask the right question, because the question you ask is the problem you solve, right? To give you an example, as you know, you can see behind me all the space stuff. That's my other company.
Into that later, yes.
So that's my other company called Moon Express. And the only reason I mentioned that is, when we said we are going to build a space company that will create a multi-planetary society, that means humans will be able to live on the moon, Mars, Venus, and beyond. What is the first question people say? How are you, if you're going to live on the moon, how are you going to grow the food on the moon? And that question, if you answer that question, the only answer is find a way to grow the food. But what if you were to ask a slightly different question, which is, why do we eat food? And if you just by asking why we eat food, and you start to realize the only reason you eat food is because you need nutrition and you need energy. And what are the different ways we can get energy? Can we get them from photosynthesis? Can we get them from radiation, right? Plants can get energy from photosynthesis. Bacteria can get energy from radiation. Why can't we do that? What kind of nutrition do we need? Well, we need hydrogen, we need oxygen. What if there is water? Then don't you have H2O? My point is, by simply asking a different question, you can actually now solve the problem rather than simply having only one way to solve the problem. Now, coming back to Viome, our thinking was, if I started to look at what causes the chronic diseases, and the underlying cause of chronic diseases, it was very clear, was a chronic inflammation, and the chronic inflammation that is coming from imbalance of our gut microbiome, our oral microbiome. The microbial ecosystem in our body was completely out of whack. And that means that when that goes out of whack is what causes the chronic diseases. And when I saw that, I'm thinking, wait a sec, how can that, if that is the problem, that is, everyone believes that is a problem, and the problem is not getting solved, what question are they asking? And it turns out every single company that was in the space was asking the same question. They wanted to know what organisms are in my gut. And if they thought they could find out what organisms are in the people's gut when they have diabetes versus they don't, maybe the problem will get solved. I thought that was the wrong question. The right question to ask is not who is there, but what are they doing? Because the human body doesn't know and care who is there. They care about what chemicals are they producing, because that's the only thing we can sense, right? Our immune system doesn't have eyes and ears. It doesn't say, I see lactobacillus hanging out there, I see C. diff hanging out there. It's not. All care about is, are you producing butyrate that is going to help my inflammation? Or are you producing LPS that's going to increase my inflammation? Are you producing sulfide? Are you producing ammonia? What are you producing that is, and is it good for the body or is it bad for the body? And I thought, what if we can ask a different question, which is, what are these microbes producing? And that means what genes are being expressed are really the right question, rather than what genes exist. And this maybe is slightly the concept I want to spend next 2 minutes explaining. Most of us have heard the term, my DNA. My DNA is unique to me. My genes are my destiny, right, Mike?
Yeah,
my
right.
destiny, right?
Yep.
You
Can't
and I
change
both,
it. Yep.
but my genes are not my destiny, because two identical twins with identical DNA, one of them may get sick and another may never get sick. So how can your genes be a destiny? In fact, just look at yourself. As we develop a chronic disease, our DNA does not change. So you can gain 200 pounds and your DNA will still be the same. You can get depression, your DNA will be the same. So you can literally get diabetes, any disease you want, and your DNA never changes. So what does change? Your gene expression is always changing. And that is literally what we thought was going to be the underlying problem for chronic disease. If we can measure the gene expression, not the genes, we will be able to find the solution. And that was about why me. The second part of why me was, are you truly obsessed about solving this problem? Now, many people that on your show, Mike, would have told you, I am just so passionate about solving this problem. I think passion is for losers. Passion is for hobbies. I am passionate about collecting the space rocks. That is not my obsession. That is my passion. Obsession is when you go to sleep thinking about it, you jump out of the bed thinking about it. So how do you know your true passion, Mike? When you wake up in the morning, and if you don't jump out of the bed, whatever you're doing is not your obsession. So forget that. So you need to be jumping out of the bed every day in the morning. Like I get up at 4 a.m. and I'm instantly awake and I'm jumping out of the bed. I'm thinking, unbelievable. I got to go work on the problem I want to do. I went to sleep last night early, right? So my point is that true obsession. And that is why me comes in. If why me is, I am not obsessed about solving this problem, and I am not asking the different question than what everyone else is asking, you are not the right person to be solving that problem.
Okay, so you laid down a lot of stuff there. I want to kind of go back and try to pick through some of it. First of all, no one's ever questioned my question before. So for you to say, that's the wrong question, it should be, how do you make things happen? I'm grateful for that, because no one's ever done that before. And it gets to what you were saying about the why me and asking different questions. So then I wanted to ask you about this. Do the best entrepreneurs out there, just naturally know to ask different questions? Or, Naveen, or do you learn by asking questions and probably asking the wrong questions how to get to the right question? Because that's an easy thing to say, and it feels like a hard thing to do, like how to ask a different question than anyone's asking.
So there are two, I'm going to unpack that for you in two different ways. First thing is, again, taking you slightly on a tangent road. When you are asking the question and the question is about solving this problem, then you have to ask yourself, are you solving the symptom of the problem, or are you solving the root cause of the problem, right? Because many of us, when they look at a problem, they think that is the cause. So let me give you one small example. Every one of us believes that lack of fresh water in many parts of the world is one of the biggest problem, because people don't have access to fresh water, they get sick, right? And they think somehow they can get access to fresh water to the people that could really help lots of people live a better life. Now, that to me, so let's assume someone says that's a problem they want to solve, and now they're building the nano filters and they're trying to find a way to desalinize the water, they're trying to distill the water, and you feel really good that you're onto something that could help lots of people, until you ask yourself a question: where does all the fresh water being used for? What is the fresh water is being used for? And suddenly you will realize the majority of fresh water is used to feed the agriculture. And you say, oh, agriculture, that is the real problem. Now, what if instead of using the current way we do agriculture, can we do hydroponic agriculture? Can we do aquaponic agriculture? Can we do aeroponic agriculture? Can we use the stuff that can use the lightly salted water so you can free up the fresh water for people? And now you're really looking at all that stuff and you feel really, really good that you got to the root cause of the problem. Unless someone turns around and asks you and say, hey, Mike, you're fixing this agriculture. Do you know where most of the agriculture is used for? You say, what? Majority of agriculture is used to feed the cattle. You say, oh, that cattle thing. Of course, the cattle are the ones that are taking up half of the agriculture. Then what if we can what do people need cattle for? To eat beef, to eat meat. But what if we can just grow the muscle tissues that people want to eat? They're not going to eat the eyes and the ears. Some people do that, but most people are going to eat the eyes.
Or the bones.
Why grow them? Only if they want to eat the muscle tissue, just grow the muscle tissues. And all I'm trying to say is, once you start to understand, then you thought the freshwater problem was really a freshwater problem. It turns out to be a cattle problem, the meat problem, or a synthetic biology problem, not a nanotechnology problem that you were using for here, right? And so that's one part of asking the right question. That means, are you actually understand that, are you looking at the root cause or the symptom? And the second part of asking the right question is, once you become an expert, the reason you never get to ask the right question is because you have taken everything, the fundamentals of that thing, for granted. So once you become an expert, you become useless in your field. When I say useless, it may be too strong a word. What I mean by that is, the best you can do is to make it 10% better or even 15% better. But when you are a non-expert, you get to challenge the foundation of everything that you have taken it, expert has taken it for granted, and rethink, reimagine, and recreate that foundation. And that's why you're able to make it 10 times better or 100 times better, not 10% better, right? And that, to me, the asking the right question happens when someone comes from outside the industry and saying, why would you even do that, right? And that's when it's like, oh, I just assume you eat food, but nobody ever said, why do you eat food? Right? And or same type of thing, like when people say this thing is too difficult or it cannot be done. I mean, we all heard, oh, going to the Venus, it can't be done. Well, what if you were to change that question? Instead of asking it can't be done, you say, what would it take for it to be done? What needs to happen for this problem to be solved? Then now you can start to break down. Well, to going to the Venus, the reason it is impossible or reason it is difficult is because we don't know how to do this, this, and this, right? To say, hey, to go to the Venus, We have to be able to leave the Earth atmosphere. We need a rocket. Oh, we got that one. Good. Well, we need to be able to go from here to there,
Venus,
and we
right?
need
Yeah.
enough fuel. You say, oh, okay. Can we use solar cell? Can we use radioactive thing? Well, that we can do. Now, to slow down, my point is you start to break down and ask yourself what technologies need to be developed for this problem to be solved. And suddenly you find the most complex problem comes down to this is what needs to be done. And once you do that, everything else will fall in place, right? And that is really the way to ask the right question.
Okay, thank you for that. And you also talked about obsession, springing out of bed at 4 a.m., how obsession is definitely different than passion. I think you did a good job of explaining that. The question that I guess I still have for you is, you seem to be living proof that you can be obsessed by more than one thing at a time. So you've got Moon Express, for example, where you're I'm going to probably not explain it right, but I'm going to try to explain it. You're basically going to go to the moon, you're going to extract minerals from the moon, you're going to turn those into fuel and other things that can then take a vessel from the moon to somewhere else. Instead of like here to Venus, you're going to go to the moon and then, right? And I think there's something to the meteors and meteorites there too, where you can mine those and get precious metals from those, get water from those, for example. But then with Viome, of course, you already did a great job explaining what you're trying to do there, which is, and you said something that I've heard you say before, but I don't think many people have heard it or believe it, that aging is a disease, and I'll get back to that in a second. But you can be obsessed by more than one thing at a time, it seems like, which for most people I think is hard to get their heads around too. How do you get your head around it?
I don't. As a matter of fact, what I do is that I spend 10 years dedicating to space exploration. And we say, you know what? This problem is now to a point where I don't need to be involved in it. I just hired a team and said, look, this is now, just go execute on it. The work is done. And then for the 4 years ago, I say, you know what? I'm going to dedicate 10 years of my life to solving the problem of healthcare. And, we say now, today, by the way, it's really interesting. 4 years ago, people thought this was a crazy idea, right? And we all hear about these crazy ideas. And as you and I both know, Peter would tell you, the day before the breakthrough, it's a crazy idea. Yeah. Day after the breakthrough, it's an obvious
brilliant
idea.
Yes,
right? Brilliant and obvious idea, right?
Yeah, right.
People say, oh, microbiome. Of course, I knew microbiome was important. But 4 years ago, everybody laughed at me and said, what the hell do you keep talking about microbiome? There is no such thing. I went to my doctor and I told my doctor about the microbiome. He laughed at me. He said, no, there's no such thing, right? Today, you can read about it in the Vogue. I mean, for heaven's sake, it has become that popular that GQ and Vogue are talking about microbiome and poop tests, right? So my point is, I launched the service 4 years ago. And today we have over 250,000 people that have already taken our test. And here's a very interesting, 97% of the people tell us that they get better within 3 months of following the recommendation. Think about 97% in 3 months. They say they have more energy, they sleep better, they lost weight, and they have now no brain fog, they don't have diabetes, all the chronic disease that we used to talk about, people are saying simply using the food as a medicine. And what we did now is to enhance that, we just launched another new product, Mike, and just happened a week ago. So in fact, this week we're shipping the product. It's called Precision Supplements. That means not only we look at your blood, human genes, mitochondrial genes, human gene expression, mitochondrial gene expression, and microbial gene expression. We give you your biological age, we give you your mitochondrial health, we give you your immune health, we give you your cellular health, we give you your gut health, and we give you your stress health, right? And then we tell you exactly for you right now, based on what's happening in your body, you need 22 milligram of elderberry, you need 17 milligram of curcumin, you need 7 milligram of lycopene. And guess what? We make that capsule for that dosage for you right there. and we ship that to you. That means every single supplement is made for you in the precise doses, precisely for you. Everything you need, nothing that you don't, right? And that has never been done. That's taking an advantage of another exponential technology, robotics, right? So it's robotics that actually makes these things for each individual on demand. That would have never been possible even 5 years ago, right?
Right.
So I think all these things, what we're doing is now allowing people to actually stay healthy. And we're going to come back and talk about aging. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so let's go to that aging thing first, and then I want to come back to what you just said because I have some things I want to ask you about there. So aging is a disease. So I think most people feel like aging is an inevitability. It's not a disease; it's a natural inevitability. We have a finite lifespan, whether it's us or any animal, and there's nothing you can do about it. You obviously don't think that, which is why you're so obsessed with Viome. Why help us understand why aging is a disease and not necessarily an inevitability?
So go back and look at 100 years ago, or a couple of 100 years ago. How long did people live? In 20s, 30s? Then people thought that inevitable that people must die after they have procreated and raised the offspring, and they must die. That's inevitable. That is what biology is for. Then people start to live to be 40. Then people start to live to be 50, and then 60, and then 70, and then 80. And people say, well, it's inevitable. By the time you get 100, you're going to be so fragile that you have to die. And they look at turtles and they say they're 300 years old. Whales that are 400 years, 500 years old. So where is that limit of, is it inevitable because you're 100? Is it inevitable because you're 300? Is it inevitable because you're 500? At what point of time it becomes inevitable, right? And the answer is never, right? And here is why. So, there are two parts to look at it. One is the only reason people get fragile today is because their inner organs are no longer able to function like they used to. Now, there are many, many things that are happening that will fix that. Not just the chronic diseases and the infection that is constantly happening in the body. And I'll come back and explain to you that we just published a paper 2 weeks ago on this, which actually describes the underlying mechanism of aging, that why we age. And number one thing was our immune system is no longer able to function as effectively as it used to be when we were young. And that's the reason older people catch infection. They can't deal with it and they die. Versus
Right.
younger people get infection like flu. They don't even know it happened, right? It happens the same thing with COVID. Young people catch it, they don't even know they have it, and older people die, right? So, what was really happening is, so there are a couple of things I'm going to tell you about it, and then I'm going to move on to the next thing. So part of it is that why does your immune system get weaker and weaker? It happens for two reasons. One is as we start to age and our dietary and other environmental factors, we start to get the leaky gut. That means all the 39 trillion microbes that are sitting in our gut, they start to move to the blood, and now you have infection. Our gums start to inflame, and we have the blood that's coming on the thing. Now the microbes from our mouth are going into our blood, and now you have a constant low grade infection all the time, and our immune system is constantly dealing with that. And what we saw in our aging paper was that our T cells, which are really the soldiers for immune system, they get less and less specific, and they get exhausted. And now imagine, so when they're exhausted, now these organisms are all over your every organ. They go into the lung, and they go into the kidney, they go into the liver, and now they are creating a havoc in every organ. And that's why we start to get diseases, which are different diseases, supposedly the heart disease and kidney disease and the liver disease, but there really is the same infectious disease. Now, that's one part. The second thing that happens also is that in aging, it is also about, I'm going to rephrase that. What is it that we want to live, right? When we say we want to live for a long time, let's forget about forever. Let's say we want to live for a long time. What is it that wants to live for a long time? Our body is constantly dying and constantly being reborn, right? We are constantly, when we were a baby, and look at we are today. It's not the same person. But We think it's the same person. So what makes it the same person? When we get our knee replaced, are we the same person? We get a shoulder replaced, we get our hip replaced, we get a new heart, we get a new kidney. What point of time do we say it's no longer me, right? My
Right.
point is, in the future, not only will be able to have stem cells that will be constantly rejuvenating and recreating our own organs, we'll be able to 3D print our own organs using our own stem cell. But what really makes us who we are is our memories and our experiences. And once we upload our memories and experience into any body or any non-biological body, have we lived forever? And the answer is yes, because that's what we are, right? So my point is, if we can take our memories and experiences and put that on a biological body or a non-biological body, there is nothing to die. You could all be living forever.
Okay, got it. So now let's go back to the Viome, because the precision supplements, and hopefully we'll have time for everything I want to go into, because there's just so much. But this is really interesting to me, because I started to become aware of this about 3-4 years ago when I had my visceral fat tested, and it's obviously not the same as Viome, but it made me aware of things that are happening inside my body that I was not aware of, like your microbiome does, for example. But you've taken that, and I want to make sure people understand what's happening here. So people send you a sample of their stool and blood. Yep. And then from that you basically sequence their microbiome. And then, but more than that, what you're saying is you can tell from that and from all the data that's been collected, you can do these comparisons, I suppose, with AI, and you can figure out precisely what fuel, nutrition is good for, works well in your body, and what works well in someone else's body, in each individual's body. Because I think I heard you say before, you use the twins as an example. Our I think it's our DNA is very, very similar, just a little bit different, right? But that little bit of difference is kind of what makes the difference, because that can make you sick or it can make you feel great, right? So am I on the right track there as to what's actually happening and what you're doing?
No. So my point is, look at every single part of our body has identical, not same, not similar, identical DNA. Remember, it's a sperm and egg. One single cell divides and makes us everything we are, right? Okay. Our hair has the same DNA that our teeth. So why is it we have the teeth not growing in our head and hair growing in our mouth? Would be pretty not fun, right? The point is, it is the expression of the same genes. The same DNA can make a hair, can make our skin, can make our heart, can make our kidney. So it's the expression of the gene that matters, not the genes. Okay. Right? So literally, when we develop a disease, our expression of the genes are constantly changing. That's number one. Number two, 99% of all the genes that are expressed in the human body. So the DNA or the genes that we get from our mom and dad, they produce about 22,000 protein coding genes. That's it, 22,000 protein coding genes. The microbes in our gut and our mouth, they produce somewhere between 2 million to 20 million genes. That means at most we are 1% human, right? And even that 1% does not stay with us, because these 99% of the microorganism, the thing that they release called metabolites, the micro poop, right? The thing that they produce, they in fact affect our body and our gene expression. So when they release compounds such as sulfide or LPS or other compounds that causes our cells to have different gene expression, it may increase the inflammation, it can decrease the inflammation. So if they're producing butyrate, it is anti-inflammatory. You're producing LPS, it is pro-inflammatory, right? So it's literally constantly changing our own gene expression. You would think if they control 99%, they would leave the 1% alone. No, not them. They even control that. That means every part of our body is dynamic. And what that means is you and I can not only prevent the disease or aging and and do it with our own lifestyle. And what I mean by that is, if 99.9% of your genes are plastic, that means you can change them, then you don't have to be sick anymore, right? Because you can literally rejuvenate and bring it back to how it used to be when you were a child.
Okay. And so the information that you get from the test, then whether you use it in the supplements or you use it some other way, it basically provides a formula that's going to maximize your microbiome's effectiveness, and that's going to then keep inflammation away. And is that right?
Yeah. So basically, what we do is we analyze your human gene expression. That means from the blood, we look at all your genes, look at mitochondria, which is this energy factory inside your cell, which used to be an ancient bacteria. We look at all the microbes in your gut, and then we say, don't eat these food, and here is why. So it tells me, don't eat tomato because I have a tomato virus. Don't eat broccoli because I am producing wheat. My microbes are converting that sulfide in broccoli into sulfate in broccoli into sulfide that is causing me inflammation. It says don't eat spinach because spinach is not being digested, and that oxalic acid or oxalate is going to convert into kidney stones, so don't eat that, right? So point is, it tells you what to eat and why, what not to eat and why, and then it tells you here are the ingredients that you need in the supplement form, and here's why. Let me give you an example. So for example, strawberry has two components. It has things that can be very good for you, such as fisetin, which is antioxidative, but it also contains compounds that are histamine, very high histamine. That means if you are someone who is sensitive to that, we will tell you not to eat strawberry, but we'll take the fisetin from strawberry and put that in the supplement.
Just a part, okay. Just a part of it, just the good stuff, okay.
Yes.
So there's really no such thing as a macro superfood then, is what you're saying.
That's right.
So
what we're saying, there is no superfood that is good for everyone. In fact, even the Popeye told us that spinach is good for everyone. It turns out Popeye was not the scientist.
Yeah, he was just a sailor. Yeah. It makes me think. I was talking to a physician on another earlier podcast, and she was talking about microbiome, and we got into the subject of colonoscopies. And a colonoscopy, the prep work for a colonoscopy, essentially, it messes with you. It messes with your microbiome. You basically have to start over. It seems like it's the exact opposite of what you would want to do. But it also gets back to what I think you were saying earlier, and I do want to get your comment on that. But you were saying earlier that when you were talking about the COVID and people taking their health into their own sort of hands, for so long, you didn't deal with the microbiome. When you didn't feel well, you went and you got a prescription for something that masked whatever it was that's happening in your microbiome, for example. And then you just went on for life to, you felt better or you didn't, and that was kind of all. But with all this precision going on now, it seems kind of crazy to mess with it once you have it, like for a colonoscopy, for example. That's like, so how do you think about that? I just thought it was interesting when she said it.
So the couple of parts, I think, to the thing you said. So if you look at the current medical industrial complex, it makes money. And I'm not saying they're bad people, but the incentives are pretty misaligned, right? Everybody in the medical system makes money when we are sick, and no one makes money when we are healthy.
Right.
Now, they may be the greatest people on earth, but imagine if your doctor has 100 people and he made sure no one ever gets sick. You know who's going to get sick? The doctor. The point is, they have no incentive. The doctor, the hospitals, the pharma companies, and especially the chronic disease, to them is a lifetime subscriber. Imagine you're 24 and you just got diabetes. Pharma companies, ka-ching, lifetime subscriber coming up, right? They don't cure any disease. They want to make sure they suppress the symptom and they leave the disease alone. So when you get autoimmune disease, you know what they do? They don't cure the autoimmune disease. They suppress your immune system. Because once they suppress the immune system, guess what happened? You get more diseases. They got pills for that. So every time they give you one pill, it causes 3 more diseases. You give you a pill for all those 3 diseases, they cause 9 more diseases. and you get to my age, you're popping more pills than blueberries, right? I mean, it's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, it's recurring revenue model.
Yeah. And so what we are trying to do is to change that, to say,
Yeah.
what if you can keep people healthy? And the medical industrial complex doesn't want that. In fact, here's a very interesting one. If you ask a doctor, they are never taught about nutrition. They are taught about, give me the ill, I'll give you the pill. There is no nutrition. They're not even. So here's very interesting, Mike, that I find. Every doctor takes a Hippocratic oath, right? You know what the Hippocrates said? Do no harm. And every doctor says, I took a Hippocratic oath. And they forget what Hippocrates actually said. He said, all diseases begin in the gut. Let food be thy medicine. Let thy medicine be the food. That was what Hippocrates said.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah. That's literally, if you Google Hippocrates, all diseases begin in the gut. And then he says, let food be thy medicine. Let thy medicine be the food. And every doctor forgets that part at all, right?
Yeah.
And the other doctors who have come along who were actually the same time said, one man's food, you heard? One man's food is another man's poison. That means there is no such thing as universal healthy food. A food that's good for Mike may be harmful to me. And even the food that's good for Mike today may actually harm him a year from now. So it's not like something that's good for you, it stays for you. Because as your body is changing and adapting, you have to keep retuning your fuel supply. Just like you tune your car, you have to tune your body.
Yeah. So I want to make sure I understand how having a healthy microbiome is not just key to longevity, but also a key to avoiding chronic illness, like cancer and like some of the other things you mentioned. Now, so I guess. So
I'm going to answer your question because I think you're struggling here. So here's what happens. The chronic inflammation causes chronic diseases, right? So if you have a chronically low-grade inflammation, acute inflammation is something that you get a wound, it inflames, and that's the way to protect itself, right? But when you have a chronic low-grade inflammation because you have a stress, or you have a chronically leaky gut, or you have a chronically environmental stress, or you're living in a house that has mold, when you have a chronic low-grade inflammation, that causes the chronic diseases. Now, microbiome has a way to either cause a chronic inflammation, or it can actually produce something called short chain fatty acid, things like butyrate, right? That can be anti-inflammatory and suppress the inflammation. 70% of our immune system is along our gut lining. Think about that. 70% of our immune system is along our gut lining because our immune system and our gut microbes are working always closely in touch with each other. It detects when there is a pathogen in the body, and they work together. The second part of the cancer part that you mentioned, Mike, there was a research that came out, 2 research papers in the last 60 days. They looked at 20 different types of cancer, and they found inside the tumor for each cancer, there is a specific set of microbes that are inside the cancer, not only preventing it from the immune system, but also feeding it so it keeps growing. And what we saw in the colorectal cancer, I'm coming back to your colonoscopy thing, what we found was there was a specific organism whose activity is 500 times higher in a colorectal cancer than the people who don't have the colorectal cancer. Right? That single organism, when it becomes really, really active, is what causes the people to have a colorectal cancer. In fact, they found that organism inside the tumor, the biopsy of the tumor, when you do that, that organism is inside that. And it's really, really active. Right? So now to answer would be, now they also found the only reason people do colonoscopy, by the way, is to be able to detect the colorectal cancer, right? Now, they found 2 things. Not only there is a company today, there's, by the way, is a public company called Exact Science, which does a Cologuard test. You can do a stool test and it actually detects the colorectal cancer. Other thing is they just came out with another research that says you can look at the saliva and it can be a predictor of a colorectal cancer. And this organism that I was telling you about that becomes highly active, it turns out that organism actually it lives in the oral microbiome. It lives in your saliva. And normally, and this is my own hypothesis, and we're actually verifying it now, is that when people are eating food, the saliva is going through the stomach, and almost all the time, the acidity in the stomach will kill these microbes, and everything used to be fine. Now we are taking these PPI drugs, anti-acid drugs, that actually kill the acid, and what's happening is these microbes which are supposed to die are no longer dying, and these are the one, this particular organism that I mentioned, it actually is the one that comes from oral microbiome, goes into the gut, and becomes highly active, and that's what causes us to have this disease.
Okay. And when I was tripping over myself earlier, what I was trying to connect was the T cells that you were talking about before. So if your T cells aren't getting tired by fighting sort of chronic inflammation and that kind of thing, they probably remain more suited to fight more chronic disease as it comes along, rather than as it, gets aggressive or something. I don't know if that's a good connection or not, but
so I think the two parts of the puzzle. One is that as we are aging, there is going to be there happens to be both our oral microbiome through the leaky gum, or from the leaky gut that is constantly causing inflammation. Also from the environment, right? So depending on what environment we live in, you're breathing and inhaling and exhaling a whole bunch of microbes, billions at a time, right? So depending on the environment you're living in, that could also be a source of inflammation that you're constantly getting inside the body. And obviously we get infections from a whole bunch of things, including flu and cold viruses all the time, right? And God forbid, COVID. So my point is, our immune system, as long as it is strong, it is able to deal with all these things. And we know it does well when we are young. I mean, young people are invincible. I mean, they rarely catch any disease, right? Why is that? Because it's our body's immune system is able to deal with that. It's not suddenly that our body gets tired. It's our immune system that actually gets tired.
Right.
So
Okay.
ultimately, there are companies, and by the way, this is one of the things that I'm assuming Peter talks about all the time. What if we can take our T cells when we are young and able to now grow them in masses, and as we need them, we keep injecting them, so our immune system is constantly as if we're still 22 years old.
So so this is maybe a bigger question. So what you're doing with Viome is we've been over, and it's giving people fantastic information on how to eat the right things to keep their microbiome in check and to take care of all these other things, including living longer. But you've also got this whole food industry that's spending billions and probably trillions of, maybe, I don't know, a lot of money to get you to buy and eat whatever it is they're making and selling. And does it come down? What do you see in the future as sort of the convergence point between what, the education you're trying to provide and the science behind it, and the goods that they want to sell and the marketing dollars behind that?
So ultimately, any company that is not personalizing the food for you is going to die, period. So I mean, it is just no two ways about it. Nobody will be buying the food off the shelf that is not designed for them. So over time, whether it is the food is 3D printed, or food is actually designed for you, or they're selling you a base and then you sprinkle on top of that is personalized nutrients for you. So imagine if you need set of food extracts, herbs, vitamins, and probiotics and prebiotics. Now you can get them in a powder form, and you could eat a yogurt that could be a base and sprinkle on top of that. Now it is Mike's yogurt, right? Because it's designed just for you, right? So point is, they'll be able to 3D print a bar right for you with all the nutrients that you need and nothing that you don't need, right? So once you do a Viome test, they will know all your results. When you go to a restaurant, they're going to make a meal for you for everything that's good for you and take out all the stuff that's not good for you. When you go buy a bar, is going to 3D print based on your Viome results. When you go out and buy any product, it's going to actually make that product for you on the spot that you want. And it will all look at what is that your body needs, right? So I think if you start to think about the Viome will become the base for everything that your body needs for the nutrition. And these companies simply become the delivery mechanism of how you want to eat that food. Do you want to eat that food in a bread? Do you want to eat that nutrients in a yogurt? Do you want to eat that nutrients in a drink in the water? Or do you want to get them in your Coke?
Okay, that wasn't the answer I was expecting, but that is a really great answer. That would be incredible to see that happen. How long do you think it'll be?
But they have no other choice. I mean, consumers are asking already the personalized stuff. I mean, look, the companies don't determine what obviously marketing dollars can only go this far. But when the consumer's mind changes, they want organic product. Companies produce organic product. When the customer says, I want a low-fat product, guess what? They produce low-fat product. When they say, I want low-sugar product, they produce low-sugar product. So my point is, consumers are going to demand a personalized product that only contains the stuff they need, right? And guess what? The companies will have to do that or they die.
Got it. So Naveen, so as I understand it, about 40 years ago, you came to the U.S. As I heard you talk about before, with $5 in your pocket, you didn't speak the language. You ended up working for Microsoft for a while, maybe some others, and before you became an entrepreneur. So I have a couple of questions for you. One, was this the mindset that you were raised with? So before you got here, you had it. And then two, what was it that sort of tripped the trigger for you to go from working in a corporate environment to becoming an entrepreneur? And yeah.
So first of all, I mean, there's a couple of very interesting things. The mindset is not something you're born with. Mindset is something you develop, and you develop based on the people you surround yourself with, right? So when you are surrounding yourself at Abundance 360 with the people who are thinking big, people who are thinking about exponential technology, it is hard not to develop the mindset of everything is possible. There is no longer scarcity of things. There's always abundance of things, right? The mindset of abundance is, I wrote a book called Moonshots, Creating a World of Abundance, right? So the point is, that mindset is something you can easily develop. And the only way to do that is to get rid of everyone who does not uplift you, someone who does not believe in the possibilities of what can happen, and surround yourself with the people who are constantly, in fact, encouraging you, building you, and asking you the right set of questions, right? So for example, if you are Mike, you tell someone in Abundance 360 and you say, hey, I am going to go and I have a plan to go to the Mars. They don't say, that guy is crazy. They say, oh, Mike, what rocket are you going to be using? What kind of fuel are you going to be using?
Right.
Do you know the place you're going to be landing at, right? They already believe, of course, you're going to the Mars. I mean, it's not like they simply want to know, where are you landing? Are you going to be landing here? Are you going to be landing here? Right? And that is the mindset that happens, rather than you say the same thing to somebody in different part of the world. They're going to look at you, it's like, that guy has totally gone cuckoo. What do you mean he's going?
What do you remember when it was that you decided that?
It is honestly, everyone talks about that somehow, that switch, that is binary switch that happens. And you and I both know it is a continuum. The ideas build on top of each other. So when someone says it's the last straw that broke the camel's back, it's never the last straw. It is the buildup of all the straws that broke the camel's back, right?
I know I've heard you talk about one of your favorite words being imagine. Can you share why that's your favorite word, or one of your favorite words?
Yeah, so I think the thing I find is the power of allowing people to dream comes from the word imagine. So if I were to simply say, Mike, imagine, guess what happens? All your preconceived ideas are out, and you open up your mind to now listening to me. What do you want to imagine, right? And now if I can describe that world to you, Mike, imagine a world where there is all green here, right? The animals are walking here. The people are of the same colors. Nobody even can see the difference in colors. Maybe they're all color blind for all we know, right? They can't even see who is short, who is tall. They're all loving each other. There is no animosity. And you say, God, I love that world. I want to live in that world, right? So when we started a company, you saw our tagline on Viome was, imagine living in a world where illness is optional. And remember what we said, illness is optional. We didn't say, imagine living in a world where there is no illness. You know why? Because if we say that, that means is we have the power to create a world where there is no illness. Instead, what I said was, you have the power not to be sick because you can make it optional for you. So if I say, don't eat this and eat this, and you look at me and say, no, I'm going to smoke, great, make a choice. Illness is optional. Right?
So 2 more questions for you, if you don't mind. The first is, when you received the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, how did that feel? What was that like?
It's interesting. It is a two-edged sword in a sense that when someone gives you an honor because they think you are an immigrant, you just happen to be a better immigrant. And I'm thinking, all my life, I said, this is my motherland. This is my country as much as anyone else's country. This is a country of immigrant. What makes it different? Because I am the first generation versus 4th generation or 7th generation that somehow I stopped becoming an immigrant, right? My point is every one of us in this country are an immigrant. So when they pick and say, well, we are going to take people who are immigrants who are making a contribution, why don't you just be very clear? The first generation of the people is all we're going after. Otherwise, everybody is an immigrant, right?
Right.
So,
Makes sense.
So part of it was really a good feeling. The things you do are actually your fellow citizens are recognize that you're doing something that is meaningful to the humanity, and the work that you're doing is actually helping the people live better. So anyway, that's probably.
Okay. And then this is something I think you said. You said there's not a problem large enough that innovation and entrepreneurship can't solve. And in today's world, and maybe not just today, maybe for a long time, we have a lot of people throwing up their hands at problems that they are professing cannot be solved, or cannot be solved it can't be solved in our lifetime, ruining this for the next generation and that. And that's a very bold statement, which I happen to subscribe to, believe in, but I want to understand where it came from and what it means to you.
So first of all, the minute you say it can't be solved, all that really means is I am not the one who can solve it, right? So the minute you say it is impossible, it becomes impossible just for you and no one else, right? So now, imagine there is no problem that cannot be solved. Even if you say there's a problem of climate change, right? The point is, we as humanity, the day we decide this problem is worth solving, we know how to do it. It's not that we don't know how to solve this problem. In fact, I would argue, and this is probably the most controversial thing I would say, COVID has a silver lining. Okay. During COVID, when we quarantined, guess what happened? The air on LA was clean air. Air in Delhi, people could breathe, right?
Sure.
The animals started to come out. It, in fact, I would say, accelerated the healthcare system by 10 years, as we talked about earlier, right? So so we know what needs to be done. And in fact, people just don't feel the pain is large enough for us to go and solve this problem. But it's not like we don't know how to solve this problem, right? And even then, you would argue, people say, I am really worried about our planet. And I wonder, where is that coming from? This planet would do just fine. I would say you should be saying, I'm really worried about the human species. Now that is a much better argument, that we as humans may not survive. This planet would actually be doing just fine. Even when we got hit by a large asteroid, all the dinosaurs died and they were much bigger than us. Guess what planet did? Planet survived, planet thrived, planet created human species. And when we all die, it may create superhumans for all we know.
Yeah, that's what it could very well happen. That's really interesting because when people do say I'm worrying about something that they can't do anything about, I always think, well, is that problem or that planet or whatever worrying about you? Because I don't think it is. So I'm not sure how much good your worry is doing, right? So, but I do agree with you that the biggest problems will be fixed when the pain gets to the point where it makes sense to put the attention into fixing it. And I know a lot of people say, well, that should be now, but the people respond to the right incentives, and when the incentives are right, that'll happen, right? Naveen, this has been so great. I really do thank you for being on the show and for giving me a great education, also for your obsession, not just for microbiome, for the company Viome, for our health, for our longevity, but also for Moon Express and all the other things that you're doing in Singularity University and X Prize and all these things that are really are exploring the ways to make the world better, significantly better. So I thank you so much for that.
Thank you, brother. I look forward to talking to you. And when the episode is out, we'll share it with the people.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of the How Did Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at MikeMalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How Did Happen podcast.